And nothing but the truth?
Nothing but the truth.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Maybe sit.
Mr. Austin, thank you for coming this afternoon. I wanted to start by asking you to confirm, have you come here voluntarily?
Correct, Commissioner.
And I just want to remind you that you're not obliged to answer anything that might incriminate you. If you feel we're asking you any questions that you feel are incriminating, you're not obliged to answer.
Noted, thank you.
Okay. And for the record, could you tell us your full names and address?
Mervyn Austin, Bel Air, Courier Road.
Mr. Austin, what is your profession and where do you work?
Currently, I am actually a pensioner, but I'm busy at UCPS as a QC manager.
When you say QC manager?
Quality control.
And do your duties as QC manager relate to quarrying and explosives?
Correct.
Could you tell the Commission what is your background and experience with explosives and commercial blasting?
Commissioner, I started in the mining industry at a colliery called Sigma Colliery in 1981, and I was a student mining official. During that tenure, I obtained my first aid certificate, mining first aid certificate, my gas testing certificate, my underground coal mines methane certificate for testing, and then I obtained my blasting certificate for fiery mines, which I have a copy of that for you.
So where were you trained?
And that I was trained at the company, through the mining.
And when was this?
This was 1981.
And what qualifications do you have specifically in blasting and explosives?
I will go through, as I'm busy mentioning, where the places I worked and how my qualifications progressed.
Sure.
I joined the company National Explosives in 1984, and they were the first manufacturers of so-called water gel explosives. The industry worldwide was already moving away from nitroglycerine products, which were very sensitive and very dangerous, and this was in 1994. I worked at this company in marketing. We were manufacturers of explosives, and I started doing my work through this company, concentrating on explosives. This company was taken over. The previous company was liquidated, and this company was taken over in 1989.
In what country?
In South Africa, sorry.
In South Africa.
South Africa.
Yeah.
And this company was called Dantex Explosives. And this company continued manufacturing products, explosive products, packaged and bulk explosives. So that's for open cast mines as such, and the package explosives for underground mines and surface mines like quarries. So I worked in all these fields, underground, bulk, as an explosive engineer. I then wrote papers about explosives, and it was presented at the international conference called BII, Blasting Analysis International, and I presented these papers on my studies with my colleague in the technical department. And these papers were then also presented at the International Society of Explosives Engineers. And that's when I became a registered full member of the International Society of Explosive Engineers, which I have here. During my tenure at National Explosives, I also obtained my surface blasting certificate because I was dealing with explosives. Because we were a manufacturer of explosives company, we had a lot to do with the Chief Inspector of Explosives, who was based in Pretoria. And our facility was about 70, 80 kilometers on the West Rand in Johannesburg. So we had a lot of doings with the Chief Inspector of Explosives about our facility, about explosive movement, controls and everything. Whilst I was in the field, Lieutenant Colonel Nuth, who was the Chief Inspector of Explosives at that time, issued me with a permit to collect samples while I was out in the field, because you couldn't bring explosive back to your factory to have analyzed. And I was granted a permit to travel with explosives in my vehicle with a restricted mass of 5 kilograms of explosives and detonators to bring back. If we had any problems in the field, I have put that certificate and that permit inside my bundle of papers. I worked also with the U.S. Bureau of Mines in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. After I presented this paper, I went to the States, to the United States, and worked with the U.S. Bureau of Mines on the paper that I had presented, and working with them, their findings of these products used underground, and what our findings were, and what their findings were, and we shared a lot of information on these products. In 1992, a paper was also presented in Orlando at the 8th Annual Centrum of Explosives Engineers, and that was also on channel effect of explosives. I put all those papers and documents inside here for your reading. And then in South Africa, we had an institution called NIXT, National Institution of Explosive Technologies, and I also presented this paper at that institution. The institution started with a course for people that were interested in doing a diploma course for explosives, but this fizzled out. It didn't continue. It was lack of sponsorship at that time. So that was my background to working with Dantex explosives. I was then affiliated with a company on a research team called Directional Explosives, and we worked on a product and on a device called a slugshot, which was used in underground mines to open up an ore pass. And we managed to get this in the industry of mining, especially for gold mining, where they have problems with hanging up ore passes, and this product was very successful. And the last project I worked on was on zirconium electronic detonators called ZET, which was also under Directional Explosives group of companies. And we worked on that, and I then left because I took up a job in the Seychelles in 1996 on the 25th of October with UCPS as a quarry manager. At the same time, I can tell you that when I joined UCPS, even though I had all my documentation in order, I still had to go to Cccl and go and sit a blasting exam. And no offense, because the law is very clear on that, what one has to do to obtain a license in Seychelles, a blasting license. So I sat that examination, and that was with a gentleman who was a general manager of TAR at Cccl, Mr. Bob Hall. Then, on the 27th of the 7th of July 1999, I then moved to Cccl as a master blaster. And that's where I was doing and responsible for their mining operation in the quarry. And that's when I worked up until July 2008. I then had left CCCL.
So you left CCCL in July 2008?
Correct.
So you were there from July 1999
Correct.
to 2008?
Correct, Commissioner.
Okay, and then from 2008?
From 2008, I went back to UCPS
And you remained at UCPS from 2008 to
till present day.
today, 2026. So from what you've told us, you have experience both in blasting and training.
Correct.
Could you tell us who in the police service is competent to assess and certify a person as a blaster?
To be honest, I would not know, because if there was somebody, then I don't think they would have required my services to do that function. Basically, in a nutshell, I'm not sure of those working in PSSW, their backgrounds, as far as any courses, what they've accomplished.
I was going to get to that point,
Okay.
but perhaps we just address it now since you've raised it. You said you don't know who's competent as the police. They
Well,
would not have required your services.
It's
What
not-
do you mean by that?
I don't mean more competent, I mean more those who have done recognized courses.
So tell us about what service you offered to the police force.
Well, the police approached me and asked me at that stage. There were a few outside blasters. These are blasters that are doing blasting in districts. They are not the same blasters that carry out blasting in the quarries. It's two different licenses, two different training,
So
two different products.
Sure. Let's take a step back. The police approached you. Who in the police and when?
Now I must think very carefully.
Roughly the year.
It was around about 2004, 2003, if I'm
Somewhere around there.
I
So-
cannot swear with my hand heart.
No problem. So around 2003
Yeah,
or
when I
2004.
joined, and there was a request for it. That's why.
Okay, and who specifically?
I couldn't put a name to it.
Okay.
To the Chief Inspector of Explosives. It might have been Compol Kilendo. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure.
Okay, and he approached you to provide what services?
Well, basically, it is to do. If I can give you a background, could I do that?
Sure.
And elaborate on it. Basically, anybody that wanted to obtain a blasting license, whether in the quarry industry or what they called outside blasters, the guys doing small blasting around the island, they would approach the police. They wouldn't approach me. They would approach the police. The police would then do a character clearance certificate and inform me that in writing that this candidate is suitable to undertake the test and training for the blasting license which he is seeking, which is then stated as an outside blaster or a quarry blaster. Once I get that information, I would then meet with these individuals. I would look at their background in the sense of the experience of what they had and who have they worked with. If I haven't worked with a blaster that's in that field, of outside blasters, he would have to then go and work with that blaster for a period of 6 months, but not only time-related. He had to go and tick off and record what he was doing when he was working with this blaster. Were they concentrating on drilling? Were they concentrating on charging up? What were they doing? So he could get a feel for it, and I would also understand where this candidate is. And then I would give them the Explosive Act for outside blasters, and there's a lot in the Act that doesn't necessarily pertain to them, okay? So I would highlight what I wanted them to understand and know as far as using explosives, security of explosives, recording of explosives, and so forth and so on. And once they had worked through the law and they were happy, they would do a theoretical and a practical examination. And that would be done on a basis when they are ready. So we'd first do the theory exam to see if they really understand before we could move on to the actual practical exam. There are candidates that I can remember I had to test them and to let them understand how the actual test would go. I had dummy cartridges made up just for them to have a dummy practice and see how what their thinking was, how they were working, how were they placing their guards, what were they taking care of, what documentation, how's it filled in, and all that type of thing, to give me a very good idea. And also that they felt they are now in a situation to do this exam. And this exam would have not taken place. The practical exam will not take place, or would have never taken place outside a quarry environment. Because if they're blasting boulders and something goes wrong, we are there, we're well covered. I could never do these tests outside in the real deal. But we simulated what the environment is out there. And once they have passed those tests, I then notify the CIE, the Chief Inspector, that this is what they've undertaken, and this is a test they've done, and they have now completed, and I would recommend they could do outside blasting in conjunction with the following products only, because that's what they were trained on. They could not lay their hands on any other product and carry out blasting. That license was specific to the products that they were trained in. And that applied to the few individuals that were going to do quarry blasting in a quarry looking to obtain a license. The same would apply. They would make the request to the Chief Inspector of Explosives. The Chief in Explosives will then in turn do their clearance and then notify me in writing that this candidate has permission to undertake training and do the testing. I would not entertain anybody in this field without that permission.
So the relationship you had with the police, was it formalized or just an informal?
Yeah, it was formalized. I remember there was a letter that I got, well, the company got, asking for me to make use of my expertise to do this type of testing for the blasters, to help them, because they did not have, and there was at that stage a few blasters that were doing outside work. It was their earnings as such.
And that letter was from the Commissioner of Police?
Yes, it was from the Commissioner of Police.
Well, we have seen some of your correspondence between yourself and the Commissioner of Police on some individuals. So I said we have seen some of the correspondence.
Okay, you had sight of it, yeah.
In relation to some of the blasters that you trained. So I wanted to ask, so the training that you provided qualified a person to become a blaster and carry out blasting in the products that you train them on?
Yes, obviously. if he's made the benchmark.
Yes, obviously after, and we'll go through that. You did talk about the exams, etc. How many people did you train in the
For
sessions?
quarry blasting, I would reckon I could count them on my hand, probably about 5, if I'm correct.
And are you able to name them?
Yes, Louis Barbie, Cedric,
Cedric Mathieu,
correct, William van der Merwe, Felix, there's a gentleman, Felix, that was a Malgas. I can remember him very clearly. And then the last one I did was a South African that had joined our company, and he was a qualified explosives blaster with a valid license in South Africa, and he went through the same procedures.
and his name?
Andries van Tonder.
Sure. And did you keep any of the paperwork in relation to these individuals?
Yeah, for the last, as per my summons, for the last 2, when I was at Cccl and I left, I think, all fairness and respect, I could not take out the documentation that belonged to Cccl. So a lot of my documentation was left behind. Okay, I was joining the opposition, and I think that's only right that I did not remove this. But for the last 2 candidates that you've asked for, their full documentation is in this file.
Sure. And talk us through the training. What did it consist of?
Well, basically, most of these gentlemen that do it have exposure to mining. So, like Cedric was a driller, if I understand. I'm not too long how long he was a driller, but he then wanted to move into blasting. So these guys are trained on drilling. They train. I do them on ground vibration. I do them with safety. I do them on handling explosives. Everything that entails explosives, I deal with them that they would be having when they do their everyday work. So it's fragmentation, fly rock, all of those, dealing with hazardous materials, how to go about it, in conjunction with hazardous materials when they are expired or something like that. That is to be done closely and not solely by themselves with the police. They are not issued a license to destroy explosives at all.
Okay, so a lot of it was practical.
Correct.
And
correct. Practical. Correct,
sure.
Commissioner.
And you also did written. You also did written
Yes, you
theory,
do the
theoretical side.
Yeah,
yes?
you do that first. I give him a design of a blast design. I don't give him a blast design. I give him parameters, and I say, this is what I'd like to do. I want to drill in blasters. Tell me how you go about doing the calculation, working out how much explosives, how much detonators you're going to do, what type of timing you're going to use, and so forth. And then how you go about the charging, how you're going about connecting, how you're going about firing, prior to firing, what's your warning systems, after firing, your blast inspection, and then signing off everything for workers to return back to that area.
Sure. And how long did this training take?
This training took, it varied from individuals. If you look at Cedric took 3 months, but I sat with Cedric every Saturday, helping him until 3 o'clock to make sure that he understood the practical side. He did. You know, there were some things that I had to brush up on, calculations, but I worked with him for 3 months, every single Saturday. Where William, because he was a quarry manager, he was longer, but it's not because he did not absorb anything or absorbed it over a long period. He was just so busy, okay? So I spent a very compact time, a lot of time with Cedric, and Williams was over time when he was available. But at the end of the day, we had to work through everything that was required.
And how did you assess the competencies?
Well, basically the way they went about everything that they had learnt, how they applied the law, and how they actually carried out their blasting.
Okay. And how did you develop this curriculum or syllabus?
Well, it's just that I've learnt over the years, and also in conjunction with the Act, and not only Seychelles Act, the Explosive Act of South Africa, and explosive acts of other countries. Okay, that's how I learnt a lot about these things, and this is what I concentrated on. There are probably things that we all know. The Explosive Act has to be updated. That we know. We know that as we're sitting here. It's outdated. So this would also help in future. It really will, and I believe it will happen. But it's utmost important that it happens. So yes, I built up a lot of experience with explosives in many factors, and working with many blasters on many mines, open cast or underground.
And you able to produce, you said you have the documentation and the things that you assessed the blasters on. I was going to ask you whether you trained them on the Explosives Act, but you've mentioned that. Did you examine them on the Explosives Act and the regulations? Yeah,
they do a physical examination on theory, and then I say on the practical side, there is a blast that they do for the actual test to conclude. So they do a physical blast. They are in charge of the blast under a licensed blaster when they carry out that exam. And that is where I do my final assessment on the practical side. And if things go wrong here, he just doesn't make the grade. Yes, go back again.
So at what point do you now feel satisfied that this person is competent?
Well, the way he's handling safety, explosives, everything around about blasting on that actual site that they do. Because they are only licensed for that quarry blasting site. They cannot do blasting any outside work or anything. It's predominant. It's 100% just for quarry operations.
And then what happened next? Did you report that to the Commissioner of Police?
I do that in writing, and the copies of those letters with their actual exams. I then send a letter to the CIE, giving them a date they did their theory exam, giving them a date they did their practical exam, and the recommendation.
And did you ever, did you know whether the Commissioner of Police independently verified your assessments of their competency?
No.
No? And is there an expiry date or a requirement for the blasters to do some refresher course?
Look, every year our blasting license is renewed, and I do believe that if there is an event or an incident that happened during this time, that, and the law is clear, this license can be revoked, you know.
But are you still doing training for the blasters?
Well, if a request comes forward,
okay,
and if I'm able to help, I will assist.
And when did you last do some training?
Probably a year ago with Mr. Andries van Tonder that joined our company.
Sure. Like many professions, most people have to do continuous professional development. So I would wonder whether all the blasters that you have trained are doing some sort of refresher course on what you've trained them.
Yeah, I think if they've been out the industry for a while and they've returned, yes, by all means. But in-house, this can be arranged and be requested. It will not be turned down.
So assuming, for instance, the company changes the products they're using?
Oh, that's very different then. That's very different because there are different products that handle different ways, especially on accessories, which falls under detonators and that type of thing. Then they would have to make themselves very familiar of these different products. But I wouldn't know if they're using different products unless I'm told. Because I don't go to their site. I don't visit their site in the sense that saying, I'll come to check up on this blaster. I don't, I'm telling you.
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. The Commission had heard evidence from one of the witnesses who could not explain what qualified you to become a trainer and assessor of blasters. So you have clarified that it was a request from the Commissioner of Police's office.
Correct.
On account of your expertise.
Correct.
Let's move into talking about a magazine manager and a magazine and a blaster. Could you help us understand what is a magazine under the Explosives Act?
Well, basically, he's the person responsible for the magazine.
So start with the magazine. What is a magazine?
Well, basically, it is a building where the explosives is stored, locked and stored. And it's his responsibility to record any movement of explosives going in and out his magazine, obviously, as well as the condition of his products in the magazine.
Sorry, you've moved on to talking about the role of a magazine manager? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, a magazine manager.
I had just asked you about what a magazine is.
Oh,
you know, us lay people think a magazine is a book.
Yeah.
So a magazine is a structure where explosives are kept.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, correct.
And a person that manages it is called a magazine manager.
Yeah, or magazine master.
Magazine master.
Yeah.
So the right term is magazine master. And you were just explaining what the role of a magazine master is.
Correct.
You want to continue?
Yeah, that is his responsibility totally, of looking after that magazine inside, outside, making sure that all the protocols are followed about issuing explosives returning records, temperature in magazines.
Sure. So what qualifications should a person possess to manage a magazine?
Well, I would really hope that, and should, have undergone training as working with explosives.
Sorry,
in the sense of not necessarily carrying out blasting, but working with handling explosives as such, understanding their characteristics.
So you started by saying training on explosives.
No, training on giving a brief introduction to explosives.
Yes, because you have to know what an explosive is.
To know what explosives is and the characteristics and what their dangers are and how they can be handled.
So the training that you do, that you've been doing, does that qualify a person to become a magazine master?
A blaster?
Yes.
A blaster wanting to become an explosive magazine?
Just the training that you've been conducting.
Well,
for instance,
it should suffice for him to look after a magazine, yes. And a magazine appointment, a magazine master appointment is actually made from the company itself, nominating someone to the Chief Inspector of Explosives. In return, the Chief Inspector of Explosives will understand or be convinced that this person is the right person and competent to look after a magazine. I don't authorize explosive magazine masters. What I do is the actual blasting license. But when I do the training for the blasting license, we do incorporate the magazine. We do speak about it. We do learn it. We do understand it. But I cannot foresee that a person that's been a blaster is the same person that's your magazine master, because that's a conflict of interest.
We'll get there. Let's remember that point for you to explain what you mean by conflict of interest. But So you would agree that there has to be some sort of specific training
Yeah, they must work through the Explosive Act and understand it.
for someone to become a
Because that's what
magazine
they're
master?
bound on.
Yes. Because assuming you trained as a blaster in specific explosives and then you're managing a magazine which has different explosives.
Yeah,
You
and
can't.
unless he's really familiar with everything, then he can do that transition, yes.
Okay.
But at the same time, sorry, Commissioner, at the same time, not fulfill both roles.
Yes, I was going to ask you that. Can one person do both?
Well,
And you said there's a conflict of
yeah,
interest.
for me it's a conflict of interest because,
Could you to elaborate on that?
well, if the same person is doing everything, and he is issuing explosives, using them, and returning, there's no other eyes as such to monitor if this procedure is correct or not. It's his word. That's why I say it's a conflict of interest. Better to have an individual qualified magazine master and the blaster outside.
Okay. Did anyone that you trained as a blaster go on to manage a magazine at CCCL particularly?
Not that I would be aware of that. Not that I would be aware of. I've trained them for blasting, that's what they did.
Okay.
If something happened in between, and I wouldn't know of it unless I had sight of it or had been informed of it.
What about William van der Merwe?
I don't know what his role was.
But you
I
trained
know
him
he
as
was
a blaster.
I can confirm that he was a quarry manager, and I can confirm that he did the test for blasting.
But
Yes.
you're not aware of whether he did any training as a
Well, we
magazine
work
master?
through it, like I say, we work through the paper when we do it. It's part of them to bring them up to speed and be aware of when they also go and withdraw explosives because they're working at a magazine. And
Okay.
there's a magazine master and you have to respect that what you're taking out has to be done accurately and returned accurately and documented correctly.
And do you know what criteria the Commissioner of Police requires to appoint someone as a magazine master?
No, I would not know that. I would not know how the CIE drafts that or gets to that conclusion.
So what we understand is that the Commissioner of Police generally appoints someone that's been nominated from the company. So if my company writes and asks for me to be the magazine master, generally the Commissioner of Police will nominate that person as a magazine master.
Well, I have to raise a question. The company does appoint or recommends, let me put it that way,
No.
recommends this candidate as a magazine master. And if the answer is based on what the company's done, how do you convince yourself that he's competent? Must be questioned.
Absolutely, and that was the question. So, what criteria would the Commissioner
I'm
of
not
Police
sure
use?
how Compol derives that. I honestly don't know.
And so, did you ever fulfill the role as a magazine master at CCCL?
No, I was a blaster, and we had our magazine masters.
And who was the magazine master at the time that you were there?
There was a gentleman, a local chap by the surname Vidot. He was actually a very good magazine master, to be honest. Vidot was his name.
And so you said Mr. Vidot was the magazine master at CCCL during the period you were there, and that was from 99 to...
No, I wouldn't say he was
No.
that duration. I'm trying to think now, and it's slipping my mind of which other magazine masters we had there by name.
That's fine. We can move on. So you were at CCCL from 1999 to 2008.
Correct, Commissioner.
And during that period, did the company have an explosive magazine?
Correct. It had.
And if so, where was it and how many?
Those magazines were at the main entrance on the left-hand side. And there were 2 magazines.
And right up to the time that you left? In
That was
2008?
that magazine remained at the gate, okay, on the left-hand side, and the magazine that was next to it was then moved. It was moved 50 meters to the left. Because they had an incident. We had an incident
Yes.
because from the weighbridge to the entrance, it's a fairly downhill, and the driver, I don't know, he had failure with his power steering or brakes, and he ran into the fence. He did not hit the container, and that's when the alarm bell started ringing. We have to get this out because it's happened now to a small pickup, and it could well happen to a bigger vehicle. So we moved it 50 meters to the left, not in the path of exiting CCCL premises.
So that container was moved while you were there?
Correct.
In towards the what year? In what year was that moved? 1 or 2 years, 3 years before you left, or right
Yeah,
in the
it
beginning?
could
Just a
be
few
about
years before you left.
3 years before I left. Could be, could well be.
And so the new place that they moved the containers to, they moved one container there, or they had more than one?
That was out of my time when they moved those and relocated that to the site where they had the explosion that I wasn't aware of
Okay.
exactly when and where they moved that, Commissioner.
Okay, so you don't know about anything about the explosive magazines, where they were at the time of the explosion?
I would know because when the blasters do the exam,
You were going there.
I go with them to the magazine, and we have a briefing in the morning of what the events are going to be for that day for the actual practical examination, and it starts from prior to you getting into the magazine area.
Fantastic. So were you familiar with the condition of the containers that CCCL used to store the explosives?
I did not see all the containers.
Okay.
I didn't go into all the containers.
Okay.
We went
But
in,
you went to the location.
Yeah, went to the location, and they withdrew their products.
And what was the construction of the magazine?
Well, and internally or externally?
Just if you describe, what were they? Was it
It
a building?
was.
Or you said containers, so right?
Sorry?
What you said containers, right?
Yeah,
so we
yeah,
talked
they
about
were
containers.
containers.
What size were those containers?
I think they were, could possibly a 40-foot and a
40.
20-foot, if I remember correctly.
And do you remember how many there were?
I know there were 4 containers.
There was 4 containers, yes.
That I can state.
Okay, and they were just the regular containers with the 2 doors at the front?
Yeah, and they were wood-lined. And their internal of the magazine was racked, where they could stack their products, like cartridge, cases of explosives.
When you say it was lined with what material?
It's actually wood-lined.
Wood lined?
Yes,
yeah?
it's a wood-lined container.
And so it had wood interior?
Correct.
And it had shelves?
Correct, it had
And
shelves. in-
what were the shelves made of? Plywood?
It was also wood, yeah,
wood?
2x2 and plywood, yeah.
Okay. And what color were the containers?
If my memory serves me, they might have been grey.
Grey.
They might have been, okay.
Could you tell us where exactly the containers were situated? I mean, did the doors open towards the CCCL internal road, or to the public road, or to Mr. Khan's house?
If I recall correctly, those containers opened towards, because they were stationed like this, they were open towards the actual security area, their security
the main-
guard as such, so that's where they opened up to. Not towards the direction of Mr. Khan's house, and not in the direction of the access road to their weighbridge. They had a road, they had a road going up to the weighbridge.
Yes.
So that was not open up there. It
So-
was all forward. Towards, they had a very big fruit tree, I think. A very big tree facing that area, and that's where the magazine's doors opened up.
So towards the main road mainly, pretty much?
Yeah, well,
The road that's by the
yeah, the road that
security
comes
gate.
around and goes inside, yes,
Secu-
correct.
security gate. And were they if the road is there, were they stacked like that or like that?
Yeah, they were stacked next to
Next
each
to
other,
each other.
facing the road. Correct.
Also, all 4 doors were
Facing in one direction.
towards the security.
Correct.
Okay. And you said you saw some of the containers, but did you ever inspect the containers or go inside them?
No.
You went in 1 or 2, but not in all?
Yeah. I did not go into to all their containers. No.
Okay. And were there windows in the containers?
No. These are sealed containers with vents.
What sort of vents were there?
I think they had vents on the side. Normally, some containers do have very small vents. And I can't remember if they enlarged their vents or if they had these whirly extraction events on top of their roof where they withdraw the hot air and it's operated by wind.
What size were the vents? Could you give an estimation of the size of the vents?
Could be about 30 by 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters.
Was there
to guess.
Was there electricity in the containers?
Not that I can recall, no.
Was there a thermometer that determines the minimum, maximum temperature?
There might have been, but not what I can recall seeing.
You don't recall
No.
seeing. And could you describe the outside of the containers?
The outside container, it was on a concrete slab. There was a wall behind it. The containers itself were all covered. They were all undercover in sense of a roof. And it was channel fencing around that container. In fact, double fencing around that container, double channel fencing around that container. So upon entrance, if I recall, you would have 2 gates that you had to go through, if I'm correct.
And are you aware if there were any earthing straps, lightning conductors?
Not off the top of my head.
You didn't
No.
observe that? And was there any earthened mound around the containers?
No, there was no mound that I can recall.
Okay. Was there any vegetation around?
I think in the front of the container there was some vegetation. Like I said, there was a mango tree, but there was a distinct cleared area between the magazine and the vegetation in front of it.
But there was no overgrowth?
No, nothing growing on the fences or anything like that, no.
Okay, can we talk about the Explosives Act and the regulations?
Yes.
What are the requirements under the Act to hold or store explosives?
Well, basically, you would need an explosive license to store explosives.
And that license is for each magazine?
Yeah, every magazine as such, let me not say container, but every magazine as such will have a license.
So every magazine is supposed to have a license?
Yeah,
right?
correct.
And
relative to the quantity stored.
Yes. I was about to say that, right? The magazine prescribes what is required to be in there.
Correct.
Right? And that we talk about the class of explosives
Correct, the class.
and the compatibility
Correct.
of the explosives and the quantity, right? Because certain explosives can't be kept together. Certain explosives should not be kept together.
Accessories, and you're correct. Accessories.
Well, that's the whole purpose of the license,
Yeah,
because
correct.
then it specifies to
correct.
the person,
It's very clear.
and it's very clear what is in that container,
Yeah, correct.
from quantity,
Yeah,
type, etc.,
right,
etc.
correct. Class, everything, yeah.
Especially the maximum quantity as well.
Correct.
And how is the magazine supposed to be constructed?
Well, according to the Act, very different. It's supposed to have a mound round. It's very clear, the Act, of how a magazine should be constructed. I have to say, most of his magazines were probably to be on a temporary basis. So that's why.
And what about the manner of construction? The actual, well, we know it's a container, but does the Act say that? Are you allowed to use a container to store explosives?
Like I said, in a situation where a container is going to be temporary, that could be a facility for a temporary magazine, a container wood line.
A temporary solution.
Temporary solution.
But
Long term, you would actually construct it as per Act with a mound round and everything, runoff area, lighting conductors, everything.
And the walls of the container?
Yeah,
Some,
they would have pre-described thicknesses, heights, and everything.
And to the best of your knowledge, how long was CCCL using those containers as, to store the explosives? What period?
All the years that I've been here.
They've always stored
Yeah,
in containers.
in containers.
And what explosives were CCCL using?
Prior to me coming here, CCL were using nitroglycerine products, which are NG-based explosives. And they were very sensitive as they were deteriorating. And then they moved over to packaged water gels explosives. And water gels become less sensitive as their shelf life extends. You have on a water gel what is called reverse gel, where the product breaks down and becomes absolutely less sensitive, very difficult to try and detonate, very difficult to work with.
So just repeat that. You said prior to you coming, they were using?
They were using NG base, what
NG base,
people
okay.
would call like dynamites, Dynagel.
Yes.
Those were packaged, paper-wrapped cartridges, Dynagel and that.
And then subsequently?
And then they moved over to water gels,
Yes.
and now they're on packaged emulsions.
Okay, so we understand they had ammonium nitrate,
Correct?
Senatal, Magnafrac, Cortex, or the non-electrical detonators.
Yeah, shock tubing, Nonel shock tubing
shock
systems.
tubing. They were using those while you were there?
Yeah, we use
You
that.
were-
We use that with electrical initiation systems to actually initiate the blast. We use shock tubing down the hole and on surface connectors, and then we connect with electrical detonator.
So in your experience, was CCCL's magazine adequate to store those explosives?
Adequate in as far as quantities are concerned?
In terms of everything, the containers, and for the container that held them? Were those, was the storage arrangement, those arrangements of having them in containers adequate to store that type of explosive?
For a temporary basis,
Okay.
but not for the fixed period.
Did you ever disclose something did you ever disclose that to management while you were there?
I had discussed this with Mr. Bob Hall when he was the manager. And I think this word temporary became a permanent word.
And what is the maximum storage period for an explosive, roughly?
It depends on product shelf life. Mainly
Yeah.
packaged explosives or shelf life is 1 year. And you'd have ammonium nitrate also going for about 1 year, depending on conditions that you store them in. We have very humid conditions and very hot conditions, and they, especially with ammonium nitrate, they tend to make these products, if they haven't sufficient anti-caking agent in them, they start hardening ammonium nitrate in their bags, and that's because moisture is getting drawn in. But with Senatal Pulsar, the shelf life is a year, and it's very easy to monitor that because each case is stamped with a batch number and a manufacturing date. So is ammonium nitrate, 25 kilogram bag, stamped with a manufacturing date. So it's very easy to control. You must make sure, though, that your stock rotation is correct, because if you keep products at the back of your magazine and you're bringing fresh ones and you don't rotate your stock, that's when you can find yourself in a bit of trouble.
No trouble. And assuming you take them out of the boxes, assuming you take the products out of the boxes, you wouldn't really know the dates if you took them out of the boxes
Yeah, it's actually stamped on their cases,
on the actual case.
on the actual case.
So
Yeah,
you'd always know when
correct.
the date of a
Yeah.
product.
There was talk, I remember, and I don't know how far it's progressed, but actually barcoding individual cartridges. I don't know how far that has progressed.
And were you ever made aware by anyone at any time that explosive materials older than what was needed for day-to-day blasting was being kept in those containers?
No, not to my knowledge.
You never known about that?
No, I have not known about that. Like I say, when I moved into there, they were using water gels. Prior to that, if they had issues with their nitroglycerin products, they could have. If they were kept for a very long period, they could have.
Okay, but you're not aware of any time that they had expired explosives
No,
in the containers?
no.
Not while you were there, perhaps, but after?
Not that I've heard
Not
of.
you've ever
Nothing
heard.
that was brought to my attention.
Okay. Did you ever purchase explosives from CCL when you were not working there?
Ever purchased? Not,
No.
purchased, no.
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 Okay. And you said that the magazines could have been like that on a temporary basis. In your opinion or your view, how long should the magazines or the containers have been in that form?
So-
For how long? You remember you talked about the
Yeah,
magazines
yeah.
and you
How
said...
long they've been temporary magazines?
Well, you said they should have kept them like that on a temporary basis. They didn't. We're aware of that.
Yeah, yeah,
In your view,
yeah.
how long should... What is temporary to you, in other
Correct.
words?
Correct. How long is temporary? How long is a piece of string?
String, yes.
I think with the situation and the products we're dealing with, it should have been right on top of anything, of facilitating a facility to store explosives correctly.
Do you mean it should have been a priority?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Okay. And I think I asked you, but I'll ask you again. For how long were those containers like that? What period are we talking about?
It could even go back as far as the 70s. 70s, the 80s, could be. All this time.
So you said you came to Seychelles in
1996.
96, yes, when you came to October 96. So when you came to Seychelles in 1996, you're aware that there were explosives on that property?
Well, prior to me coming here, the explosives were stored at Grand Police.
Okay.
And at PSSW or Portru, they had a semi-underground magazine. And what would happen, the bonded stock would be at Grand Police. Would draw stock and move it to Portru. And then for your daily blasting or your weekly blasting, you would extract from explosives from there. Then you would go back and refill that magazine. That's how it was operating, the explosives. CCL was always one that was doing outside sales for supplying products for outside blasters. Hence, they had that explosive magazine there. It was all small diameter explosives.
And you said you left CCL in 2008, so you were not present or connected with CCL at the time of the explosion, correct?
No, not at all. Just connected in a sense of just working and training their two blasters. That's my connection. That's
Sure.
my connection.
And were you ever interviewed or questioned by the police after the explosion?
No, not at all. I did get a call to come to Coast Guard, and if my timing is correct, it should have been probably, I think, close to a year. and they called me to meet I think it was a staff sergeant or a sub-inspector. And I went to Coast Guard and he wasn't available, and then I think a sergeant lady spoke to me,
Sure.
but not in great detail.
Sure. And knowing the CCCL site, do you have a view of what could have happened to cause that explosion?
Commissioner, respectfully, there is a puzzle. We've got the box, but we don't have pieces. I haven't been privy to any reports from anybody of what actually took place. I don't want to make matters worse by putting out false belief and making statements without some substantial evidence of what reports and what people saw, what people did on that site when they were there that night. I haven't had privy of that. So it's very difficult to give a reply as to what had happened. Inside, you paint a picture, but that picture cannot be put out because you have to have enough of what actually had happened from those who were present that night to draw and start building this puzzle. And I respect what your question, I really do, because this is why the Commission is here. But there's still a long way to go and a lot of people to be questioned. And as this proceeds, I will also be attending, so I would really like to know what happened here. And I'm going to piece, I will piece my part of this puzzle. But I need to hear things, how things were done, what happened, and that type of thing. So honestly, at this moment in time, I don't want to put out anything out there of what had happened or what I believe until I have something a little bit more conclusive for me to make my decision or my input on what I believe happened.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Austin. I will invite Mr. Ruku.
Mr. Hostin,
Yes, good afternoon.
afternoon. What prompted you to resign at the CCL? Was it disagreement with the management, recruitment, or looking for a greener pasture?
Mr. Ruku, in this forum that we're in, I will say to you, moving on for greener pastures. Yes, sir.
A greener pasture.
Yes, sir.
Secondly, my second question is, during your 10 years blaster at the CCL, has there been any minor incident or accident? I mean, chunks of rock falling on rooftop at housing estate in the surrounding area?
Not under my guard. What I can say is what I heard mentioned in the Commission inquiry so far, that there was a taxi involved. I wasn't even aware of such incident until I heard it, yeah. So,
Maybe there has been, you are not aware.
yeah, I'm not aware. I really am not aware of that, and I heard it, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Ruku.
Mr. Austin, I have a few questions, clarifications rather. You've said that you trained 5 quarry blasters, and you've mentioned their names,
Yeah.
such as Louis Barbie, Cedric Machot, William van der Merwe, Felix, and Andres.
Correct.
And you've also trained and recommended outside blasters. These are non-quarry blasters, right?
Correct.
The ones who go to blast in the district.
Correct, yeah.
How many would you say have you
That also
trained
probably,
and recommended?
I would say that I did training with probably about 4 or 5 as well.
4, 5. Okay.
A lot of those blasters, sorry if I can just add on that, a lot of those blasters were already issued with licenses prior to me arriving at to doing outside blasting.
Now, when you were training this handful of people to be blasters, did you cover the following components, such as knowledge of explosives and their components, storage of explosives, handling, blasting, safety practices, post-blasting procedures? Were all of these components covered in the
Correct.
training?
Correct.
Okay. So, if somebody had been recommended by trained, assessed, recommended by you, and they received their license, you would assume that they would have a working knowledge of all of these components
Correct.
of the blasting industry. Okay.
They will,
Now-
they will have the knowledge, okay, of how to do things correctly.
Yes.
If they take shortcuts
Yes.
and not work according to what they've been trained,
It's
they will
something-
face consequences.
Now, notwithstanding the fact that your candidates were trained, they were assessed, and they were recommended, would you take into account matters such as their character, whether they were law-abiding citizens, basically whether they were...
Stable individuals.
Yes,
Um,
that's what I mean.
I think, yeah, it's an important question that, but that's why the police do a character clearance certificate.
Okay.
And if they, because like I said, the individual applies to the Chief Inspector of Explosives, and for some other reason, if he has a criminal record, I wouldn't even been known that the CIE has now put a cross and said, no, he's not in good order to do this type of work and work with these products.
You will agree, though, that a character certificate would only
I don't know the
Be
depth of it. I don't know the
Yes,
depth of a
yes.
character certificate or the research done on an individual. You know, I
but
don't
it
know.
would only cover the things that they would have been convicted of. So let's say you have somebody who's passed
yes.
all your exams,
Yes.
but he's a drunk
Yeah.
or he's dishonest,
Yeah.
but there is nothing showing in the criminal records there.
Yes.
So he will slip through the cracks.
Yes.
But if you had knowledge that he was an unfit person to be handling explosives, would you recommend the person?
Yeah, I would recommend his license be revoked immediately.
Okay. Or you would not recommend him for issuance of a license
Yeah,
in the first place?
If they had to say to me, listen, the guy has no criminal record, but he has a serious drinking or drug problem, from my side, I would say no. go.
Definite no.
Because
Okay.
his mind is not clear when working with dangerous goods, and you need the full attention of your mind when you do that.
Now, in the 9 or so years you worked at Cccl, when you were training your potential blasters, I would say, whilst you were going through the explosives legislation with them, if there were any flaws or weaknesses at Cccl for the trainees who were on Cccl side, perhaps working in some other role, these flaws or non-compliance would have been obvious, right?
Yes.
And you would have had a conversation with these people.
Yeah, I
About
would have
it,
definitely on the
obviously.
explosive side, you
Yeah.
know, as when they're working with explosives on the blasting blocks and they were handling explosives. If I'd seen something, I would have told them straight out, you know, let's not accept them.
And you've
remind
never had such
them.
conversations
no,
about...
not while I was there with my
Okay.
attention, but even being when we did the explosives, and I will say that because when they do their practical, they make sure everything is 100%. They really do. They have to, otherwise they're not going to pass.
So there were nothing
no.
raised the flag for
No,
you
no,
at
no,
Cccl
not-
throughout the 9 years that you were
Yeah,
there?
no. I had a very good working relationship with the people on that side.
That would be all. Thank you, Ms. Olsen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dora. Is there anything else you wish to tell the Commission?
Commissioner, at this moment in time, no.
No.
Thank you.
You're at liberty to come back at a later stage if you feel there's something you wish to add.
Thank you,
Just 1 minute. Sorry, Mr. Austin, just one more question. The proximity of the airport from the CCCL site at Providence, should that, what do you think of that?
Is it relative to just the actual airport itself or to flight path?
Flight path particularly.
That's-
We looked at the flight path and actually I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's 150 meters at some point or 160 meters.
If I recall that evening and listening to the gentleman from the weather station, from meteorological department, if a shockwave is traveling horizontal and hitting the airport, and the damage it caused at the airport, and that is, say, I think 3.2 or 2.8 kilometers. So if it's going horizontally, definitely it's going vertically. So it could be of concern.
Yes. Thank you. I think that we have no more questions for you. Thank you so much for your time. This brings our afternoon session to a close. We will resume tomorrow at 9 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. You can be excused.